The Case of the Missing General. Chapter 1, Steven takes the General's case. Steven J. Stedinger had worked for the Daily Investigator for so many years that he thought he had seen it all. That was until he came across the most unusual case of his career, the case of the missing general. It was January 2008 and a little past midnight on a Friday as Steven unlocked the driver's side of his Honda Accord and scooted in behind the wheel. Carefully setting the case file down on the passenger seat, he adjusted the rear view mirror and turned the key in the ignition. A drizzling rain was just beginning to fall, and as he turned on the windshield wipers he found himself reflecting upon the crazy events of the day that had led to him taking the general's case. It had all started that afternoon when his faithful and longtime assistant Dorian Starnes, with her usual disregard for knocking, burst into his office looking as if she had seen a ghost. Struggling to catch her breath, she finally managed to blurt out, "Steven. It's Sheila. She's in trouble and we have to help her." Dorian's bright green eyes had looked pleadingly at Steven as he ushered her over to the armchair in front of his desk, and although it was usually reserved for clients, he urged her to sit down. As Dorian was settling back into the cushioned armchair, Steven remembered her mentioning, on more than one occasion, that she and Sheila had been best friends since high school. Considering their close friendship, Steven better understood Dorian's obvious distress. Heading over to the sparkling water cooler in the corner, Steven filled a cup with water and brought it to Dorian. After taking a few sips, she seemed more composed, although still a bit flushed, as she launched into her explanation of what had happened. "Sheila just called and told me that they are planning to investigate her father, the general. Can you imagine that, Steven? Sheila's father, General Armstrong, has been a revered figure in the military. He led troops with honor in 2 wars and won commendations that could fill a room. The idea of him becoming embroiled in a scandal is unthinkable." Dorian's voice shook ever so slightly as she continued, "Apparently, he filed some kind of report stating that he had proof of the existence of interdimensional portals. I admit it sounds far-fetched and I do not really have the faintest idea what he could be talking about, but I do know this, Steven, the general is a good man and he does not deserve this. Sheila said a phone call came through to her a few moments before she rang me. Some unfamiliar voice warned her that they were planning to question her father and that she needed to keep her head down." As Steven continued to listen intently, he shook his head sympathetically and wondered what in the world the general could be referring to. Like Dorian, he had never even heard of portals before, much less interdimensional ones. In the end, and in spite of any misgivings he had, Steven decided to take the case. "Did she happen to say who this voice belonged to?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "No, just that it sounded threatening," Dorian replied, her hands nervously fidgeting with the fringes of her sleeves. "Sheila is terrified, Steven. She begged me not to let this fall into the wrong hands." "Then we need to help her," he said, a resolve beginning to crystallize in his mind. "We need to find out what's going on and clear the general's name before it's too late. I'll contact Sheila to see if I can meet with her tonight." Dorian let out a sigh of relief. "I really can't thank you enough, Steven. Please let me know how it goes with Sheila as soon as you can." Dorian seemed a great deal calmer as she gave Steven a quick hug before leaving his office, while Steven, on the other hand, no longer felt calm at all. The weight of the case was already heavily upon him as he sat pensively at his desk with furrowed brow, avidly reading through the general's case file for the remainder of the day. What he read there left him in such a state of disbelief and shock that he had gone about his routine of closing up the office for the weekend in a daze. Before leaving for the night, he returned to his desk and picked up the phone to call a trusted contact at the sheriff's office. Finally, on the 3rd ring, his buddy Stan, who always worked the late shift, answered. Steven explained the situation in a strained tone of voice and then cut straight to the heart of the matter. So Stan, do you think the military would cover something like this up? Wincing at Stan's reply, Steven thanked his friend and hung up the phone, visibly shaken. Stan had told him all he needed to know. There was definitely something sinister afoot, and the local law enforcement knew more than they were letting on. A sudden and loud clap of thunder brought Steven fully back to the present moment. It was raining more heavily now and the visibility was poor as he switched on the brights to better see the road ahead. The rain beat against the windshield like the drum roll of an impending storm. The weather seemed to mirror the dire situation, and Steven felt an urge to rush to action. Fortunately, he lived fairly close to the office, but he did have to take a few back roads to get to his home that was situated in a semi-remote cul-de-sac. As he pulled up into his driveway, he was glad he had remembered to leave the porch light on that morning. Unfortunately, the rain was showing no signs of slowing down, so he decided to make a run for it. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the general's file, sprinted out of the car and ran as fast as he could to the front door. Wasting no time, he unlocked the door and entered the front foyer of his home. Quickly checking the general's file, he was relieved to find it intact and relatively dry. His medium-length sandy brown hair, however, was now slightly damp, and as he pushed his bangs back out of his eyes, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror and was startled. He looked uncharacteristically disheveled, and his usually serene brown eyes had a wild look about them he had never seen before. Feeling somewhat shook by his unkempt appearance, he welcomed the diversion of his tabby cat Whiskers, who was meowing loudly at him. Steven could not help but laugh as his persistent tabby began winding himself around and around Steven's legs to get his attention. He deftly tossed the case file onto the side table in the foyer and leaned down to scoop Whiskers up into his arms. Purring happily, the tabby cat only stayed about a minute before jumping down and making a beeline for the kitchen. Steven promptly followed after Whiskers. "Sorry buddy, you must be hungry. I got tied up late at the office again." Whiskers looked unimpressed as he headed over to his food bowl and promptly sat back on his haunches, clearly waiting to be fed. Steven opened up a can of cat food as fast as he could and spooned it into Whiskers' bowl. While Whiskers was busy eating, Steven loosened his tie and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. Suddenly a pang of hunger seized Steven too, and he began rummaging through the leftovers in his refrigerator until finally settling on a container of vegetable fried rice. He had nearly finished all the rice when the wall phone rang. Surprised to be getting a call so late, Steven picked it up on the first ring. "Hello, this is Steven." The voice on the other end was frantic and high-pitched. "Steven. Thank God I reached you. I am really sorry to be calling you so late at home, but Dorian gave me your number and it is an emergency. This is Sheila, the general's daughter. I did not know where else to turn for help, and Dorian has assured me that I can trust you. Please, would it be okay if I came over right now?" Steven glanced at his kitchen wall clock. Even though it was now 12:30 a.m., he was suddenly wide awake. "Of course, Sheila, I will help you. Do you need the address?" "No, I already got it from Dorian." "Thank you so much, Steven. I can't tell you what this means to me. I would explain more over the phone, but I am not sure that is such a good idea. Thank you again. I will be there soon. Oh, and since we have not yet met in person, I will be wearing a purple raincoat." Steven heard a soft click followed by a dial tone and hung up. Bracing himself for the unexpected, he decided to make coffee, and after setting up his coffee maker, he placed 2 large coffee mugs side by side on the kitchen counter. He then quickly glanced over at Whiskers, happy to see him curled up in his bed and sleeping soundly, and Steven spoke out loud, "I am glad at least one of us will be getting some sleep tonight."